Hi guys, welcome to the very first episode of Health vs. Wealth, where we focus on the financial side of health. In this episode, I talked to 4 different people on how the plant-based market is doing. First of which is Jeremy Au, an investor and the host of the Brave podcast. I then talked to 3 different companies who are running operations on the ground to find out what are the challenges and whether their food is really healthier. Before that, just a few updates. First of which is that I'll be at the Center for Healthy Longevity's supplement conference at the end of the month. If you have any questions on supplements, feel free to DM me. I'll be speaking to some of the guests for a podcast interview. The second update is on ALLSET Sports and Healthy Aging Lab. I'm currently in the pre-launch phase and I'm focusing on runners, helping them do strength assessments that help them run faster as well as run injury-free. If you are interested to find out more, again, feel free to contact me. Coming back to the episode, the first question I asked Jeremy was on his thoughts on the plant-based landscape, and this is what he had to say.
So I think there are 2 pieces that I think about it. One is from a technologist perspective, and the other one is from a personal nutrition perspective. I think from a technologist perspective, I think there's a fundamental fact that, when we look at the energy of the food chain, there is a certain level of cost of vegetables because it's just doing photosynthesis. And then after that, you're doing animal proteins, which is a function of from vegetables, for example, into feed into animals. And obviously, it's a fundamental fact that when you consume something, for example, animal protein, you only are converting a fraction of the energy embedded in that. So there's a energy attrition in that step. But there's also a lot of work in terms of manufacturing, the logistics, the operations, the production, let alone kind of the risk in terms of disease and quality controls and so forth. So actually the whole value chain in that sense, you can imagine, of proteins from animals is a long one and also, I think, a difficult one. What's interesting about alternative proteins as a result is that you're able to therefore bypass, I think, the energy attrition from vegetables to animal proteins, but you're also able to industrialize the production supposedly and theoretically in a way that is more scalable, more distributed, and also, frankly, I think more ethically palatable to the audience, for example, in contrast to factory farming. So, I think there's an interesting analogy, which is, I think, what people want to say is that if you look at solar cells, at the start, solar cells were way more expensive, and so you needed a lot of government subsidies, and you had to be a crazy doomsday prepper to want solar cells, to, hey, it's within reach, or some subsidies, and the rich people are buying solar cells, or if you're very environmentally conscious, all the way to, it's roughly on par to, it's cheaper, right? And so in many parts of the world, solar cells are actually cheaper than, your fossil fuels. And then especially if you add a battery pack, to be off the grid, then effectively, you're a net generator of electricity in many parts of the world. So, suddenly you're not just having electricity that's, not just expensive, but now it's on par, then cheaper, to becoming a profit center. And so you can imagine that alternative proteins, I think with the right industrialization scale, I think the promise is, it offers a pathway where theoretically an alternative protein can eventually not just be on par with the cost of animal protein, but will be cheaper because, again, of what we mentioned, it skips energy attrition. You're able to industrialize the production. You're able to be more distributed in that sense. That being said, I think the awkward reality is that scale-up process has turned out to be very problematic. So I think historically we've been able to do, for example, cultured cells at a small scale, but it's very difficult to do that at large scale. And so I think we're very much in the early stages of the R&D and the commercialization and industrialization of that process. And so I think a lot of companies are looking to blend, for example, plant proteins and so forth in a way that gets the overall cost to something that's there. And it does make me think a little bit, which is that if we look at the future of plant proteins is, I think we'll only get mass adoption when it's cheaper than animal protein. I think there'll be a net benefit for a lot of the animals that are out there. And I think it'll be a great option for many consumers. So that's how I think about it from the plant protein side. On the other hand, I think from a personal perspective and nutrition and longevity perspective, I think there's an interesting dynamic where a lot of the alternative proteins are, frankly, highly processed, right? So basically, we're taking, for example, plants, and then you blend it all up, and you do separate components, and then you put it together. And, technically it's a plant, but that's like saying Coca-Cola with high fructose corn syrup is also a plant, sugar, right? And so I think there's a little bit of a dynamic where I think in today's world, there's a lot of pushback, I think, because, you're doing something that's more ethically savory, but then from a personal nutrition basis, you're actually substituting an animal, obviously, but it is something that your body knows and has eaten for, tens of thousands of years, like chickens, right? One of the first few animals to be domesticated. And so your body knows how to digest chicken, but a chicken-like product, right? I think there's a lot of questions there. And so I think there'll be an interesting set of research, I think, which would be, as we substitute more and more processed foods, they're not really a vegetable, but it's a processed food. It's the same way we treat, Ritz crackers, and any wheat crackers and cornflakes. There's lots of different processed foods that are plant-based but turn out to be unhealthy. And I think there's going to be a next bound from a personal health perspective.
I then asked Jeremy what are some challenges companies in this sector have to go through.
The field of startups is actually very nascent right now because everybody is very focused on the scale-up and the production side. So the R&D that's going in and the technical risk that these founders are taking is something to be applauded. There are companies, for example, like Turtle Tree, that's looking to build out milk proteins. It's not an easy path. They previously came on the Brave podcast from Lin, the CEO, to speak about some of the dynamics and product commercialization choices they made. And she underscored how hard it is in the space because it's not just obviously the science and R&D, but also the scale up. You got to go through food approval because you all have to eat it, and that needs to be approved. And then after that, you need to scale out again, and all of that costs money. Not an easy set of parameters to build around. And the simple fact is that there are many startups that have struggled with that process. So, I think there's a lot to be learned. I use the solar cell industry. You actually look at the solar cell industry, most of the first generation of startups and solar cells are no longer with us. They pioneered it, they educated the consumers, and then that legacy was taken on. The talent moved on, and you saw that the early hub for solar cells actually used to be Germany. And now there's hardly a solar cell industry really crushing it in Germany because, China was able to, eyeball it, localize it, subsidize it, and scale it out at a much bigger scale for their own energy security purposes, but also because it fit well with their manufacturing and supply chain, value chain, upskilling roadmap. And the world is better for it, right? So now, if you think about it, the next stage that we're seeing now is that China is building out the next wave of, electric cars, right? So historically, the internal combustion engines, all of that was built by who? The Germans, right? And then after that, obviously, Detroit in the US. And guess what? The Japanese learned from both of these countries, and then Japan became an excellent place for car manufacturing and exports. And China now has learned from all of those three places, but they've kind of did a jump, and then they ended up, basically building it out, but using the electric engine as the base, right? And so that generational shift in technology, was built on the previous hubs, but was eventually gained by somebody else. And so what I'm trying to say here is that if you ask me, Jeremy, do you believe that in 100 years we'll see alternative proteins that are plant or cultured? That I'll be yes, because I do believe that there is a viable roadmap for these proteins to be cheaper at scale than the traditional way of doing this. And once it's cheaper, and guess what? Even though it's less healthy, more processed perhaps, but people will buy the cheaper protein. I think it's a winning strategy and give people something that they want, but cheaper and more widely available. Yeah, great. So I do believe that's going to happen over time. But which startup that will get there? My suspicion is that a lot of it is going to be predicated on those who are able to scale that out. I think that scaling dynamic is going to require a lot of government subsidies and support. So I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic, because what I'm trying to say here is, we may see it more look like a manufacturing, contract manufacturer or bottling plant dynamic, right? Where that has scale and has the economics, rather than at the end of the day, because if you think about it, I don't really think about what kind of brand of chicken I eat, right? If they, like, I just eat chicken, and then the restaurant tells me it's heritage chicken. Sometimes they tell me, oven roasted, and to tell me how it's prepared, but they don't really give me a brand of chicken, right? Like, Tyson's chicken, no, right? They don't. X-brand chicken, they don't, right? So chicken is a commodity, right? Beef is a commodity. Well, there's Wagyu beef, but once they stop saying Wagyu, then everything else kind of like, it's beef, right? Your wontons, and there's definitely no one knows which pig it came from, right? So what I'm trying to say is, like, because that end product is a commodity effectively, where it's based on price, the only way I think there's a breakthrough is when it's cheaper than the conventional protein. And it may not be the first or second or third generation that manages to close the price gap, but it could be the fourth generation that crosses that final gap and then becomes the TSMC, I guess, of alternative proteins, right? So I think that's really the context of it.
With that said, we now feature 3 different companies, the first of which is Thoughtful Food. And I asked them about their transition from the first product that they have launched previously, which looks pretty different from what they are currently launching. I asked them about this transition and how their food is healthier. Hi Karen, welcome to the show.
Hi.
I understand you guys previously had a first iteration or first product.
So you're right that, the first product base that we came up with is a series of protein dry mixes. And when we developed that range of products, it was specifically to cater to the healthcare industry and caterers who are cooking a lot of meals on a daily basis. And we kept it dry intentionally because right from the beginning, Thoughtful wants to cut off the cold chain in terms of the logistics. Yeah, because keeping in mind that actually food cold chain contributes at least up to 4% of the global carbon emissions. So by doing away with that, that's our little contribution towards sustainability. So for that, it has been doing quite okay with the B2B sector. So it's just moving forward that, we wanted to reach out to more end consumers. So now with the end consumers, things are a little bit different in terms of how people like to consume their meals, because people are busier now. So with very busy and active lifestyles, convenience plays a very huge part in deciding, what I want to eat, in between my meetings, after my workout, or even, on the way to an appointment. So we've made them into very convenient little pots. So you don't even need a microwave if you're happy with a room temperature. It's just peel and a spoon is included, and then you just eat it on the go. And that kind of guarantees you that, okay, you're still getting that necessary nutrition, that you require with high protein and high fiber. Yeah.
On your first product, which you sold to Singapore Sports School and various hospitals, I'm pretty convinced it's a healthier version. With this, how does it compare to alternatives in the market? Is it healthier?
You mean the dry mixes?
Yes.
Yes. I would say we are definitely considered healthier than quite a fair number of brands, in a sense, because we are minimally processed. In that sense, it doesn't go through many stages of processing. Everyone is familiar with dehydration and dry blending. And we also do not add any additional artificial seasonings or flavorings. In fact, we did not even add a single grain of salt. So we have kept the mix very versatile for the chefs to decide what they can cook with or what they want to include into their recipes. Because in a hospital, for example, you're catering to different types of patients. So there are patients who cannot eat salt at all. So we are just giving them the versatility to follow the dietitians or nutritionist instructions. So in that sense, there is a lot of customization and you can have full control in terms of what kind of nutrition aspects you want to get out of the mix.
A footage I left out from this interview is that the dry mix is an ingredient in the ready-to-eat meals. And for more information on companies featured, check out the links in our description. On that note, I spoke to another company, Herbyvore, who produce plant-based cheese, and I asked them how their food is healthier, what they're doing to penetrate the market, and what are some of the challenges they face. Hi Lena, welcome to the show. Can you tell me more about how the product has evolved?
Yeah, so I represent the brand Herbyvore. The premise of the brand, right, is really two words. We'll call it sustainably nutritious. Why? Because the products are made with a base ingredient, which is really protein, plant protein, but not from soybean sources. A lot of plant-based products are from soy. Our products are made from protein extracted from pulses. So pulses as a word, a lot of people are confused. I mean, if you are not of an Indian descent, you don't really regularly eat pulses in your diet. So pulses are really like the edible seeds of a legume plant. And they will be like your things like your chickpea, fava beans, lentils, any kind of lentils, your peas. So all the dried items that you find at whether it's the grocer section or the organic section. And those products, right, really are, I would say, a superfood. They are a great source of protein. They really do very well. But the problem is if we don't eat it as a regular part of our diet, right, what can we do about it? So my company has decided, why don't we do this? We can extract protein from these pulses and make it into things that consumers are familiar with. So Herbyvore belongs to a company which upstream, in its operations, it does plant protein extraction using crops like pulses. So that's how the kind of the business evolved. And initially, we started with a product called a plant protein block. It's very simple. It's just like a piece of tofu with 6 ingredients that contains pea protein, 30 grams of pea protein in one block. And we're teaching people how to use it as a dairy replacement, as a meat replacement. And recently, we launched a range of plant-based cheeses, like your regular mozzarella, cheddar, as well as Parmesan, but making a so-called a dairy-free alternative to the traditional cheeses.
How is that doing?
Well, I would say for the cheeses, it's very new. When we first started, and I'll tell you, with every startup, we all struggle, right? We have limited resources. We try to launch as early as we can. So initially, we launched our cheeses with just pea protein. And over time, we got feedback from the market, even though we think that it's cheesy enough, it's whatever. People are saying, hey, you know what, you could do better. Can you have slightly less beanie taste because we have pea protein in there, right? So we continued to do R&D and we actually decided on a protein blend. So currently our cheeses contain fava bean protein and pea protein. And because of it, it tastes less beanie, more neutral tasting. So the natural cheese flavors comes on better. So I would say this iteration worked better. And in fact, we have spoken to several stakeholders who are quite supportive of what we do because obviously there's a lot of plant-based meats out there, but they don't really have many options for plant-based cheeses. There's also nutritious that tastes pretty good. So I think we have a positioning. We just need to make sure that we get our way, to the users.
Upon hearing what Herbyvore as well as Thoughtful Food has to say, I thought of another company that has the storefront and whether things would be different. And so I spoke to Kones and I asked the same questions, whether their food is healthier and how are they seeing the market.
Kones is a plant-based, all-natural ice cream brand. We also have desserts, but predominantly we are focusing on ice creams made in Singapore, very proudly. And most of our products are gluten-free, which is suitable for all sort of people, right? So our positioning is mostly around, that we are all natural, we are plant-based, we don't put any artificial ingredients or anything which is made in a synthetic manner. Actually, a lot of consumers come back and as per our recent data, about 56% is the repeat rate, whereas FMCG or any F&B generally has about 20% if they're very lucky. That's the repeat rate. And the primary reason is the product is good and I think our service is also top-notch. And we interact a lot with the customers when they are here. And I would narrate one incident to you. Like right now we are at Paragon Mall. There's Paragon Medical Center nearby. Almost every day, there's this lady, a white lady with a kid. The kid has some esophagus allergy and he can only eat our product. And another incident happened at Forum where there was this 7-year-old and the mother started crying. And we were like, what happened there? And she said, it's the first time that the kid tried a cone. And I was like, wow, like this is such a normal thing for us, right? We eat gluten all the time. So we were the only ones selling a gluten-free cone. And the kid has been wanting a cone. As simple, it's not even a luxury, as simple as a demand as a cone. And could never have it. So similarly, there are a lot of people, not from the margins of the dietary habits, but even the regular ones, who want to manage their indulgence, who are very aware of whether there are chemicals in the product, whether there is palm oil in the product, they come back. And they don't have to compromise on the taste and don't have to shell out a lot of money. So yeah, that's why we have a very high repeat rate, and probably with some more marketing and more efforts towards improving our service, that rate is gonna go much higher. We feel if we can be kind as much as possible, as much as financially possible, we push and go extra mile. Whether it is the delivery for you, whether if you bossed up a delivery, we'll replace for free. Whether it's going an extra mile and singing a song for the customer, which we have done earlier, or dancing at a party. We do a lot of stuff to make everyone happy as much as possible. Yeah. So when you're at Kind Cones, you can feel like it's your home, and you can demand a lot of things which are, I would say, in the realm of doing a good business. Then we'll definitely service that.
With that, we wrap up the very first episode of Health versus Wealth. If you have been following us, you would know that this is something different from what we typically produce, talking to so many people and talking to people online. And so let me know your thoughts on whether this is something you'd be interested in. If not, we might revert back to our old format where we have been picking up a little bit of traction. That's all for now. Till next time, take care.